Hi everyone! Today we are going to continue with our reading Harry Potter and the Chamber of Secrets. Where we left off yesterday in our story, if you'll remember, Hermione decided that what they should do is to get into the Slytherin house to see if Draco is really the heir to Slytherin. And then that way they'll be able to kind of clear Harry's name with all of what's going on. So they decided to have to do this, they'd have to use Polyjuice Potion. And that is where we are going to pick up today. Chapter 10, The Rogue Bludger. Since the disastrous episode of the Pixies, Professor Lockhart had not brought live creatures to class. Instead, he read passages from his books to them, and sometimes he reenacted some of the most dramatic bits. He usually picked Harry to help him with these reconstructions. So far, Harry had been forced to play a simple Transylvanian villager, whom Lockhart had cured of the babbling curse, a yeti with a head cold, and a vampire who had been able to eat anything except lettuce, since Lockhart had dealt with him. Harry was hauled in the front of the class during the next Defense Against the Dark Art lesson, this time acting as a werewolf. If he hadn't had a very good reason for keeping Lockhart in a good mood, he wouldn't have refused to do it. Nice, loud howl, Harry, exactly. And then, if you'll believe it, I pounced like this and slammed him to the floor, thus with one hand. I managed to hold him down with my other, and I put my wand to his throat. Then I screwed up my remaining strength and performed the immensely complex Homorphous charm. He let out a piteous moan. Go on, Harry, higher than that, good. The fur vanished, the fangs shrank, and he turned back to a man. Here is a picture of Gilderoy Lockhart. Simple, yet effective. Another village will remember me forever as the hero who delivered them from the monthly terror of werewolf attacks. The bell rang and Lockhart got to his feet. Homework. Compose a poem about my defeat of the Wagga Wagga werewolf. Sign copies of Magical Me to the author of the best one. The class began to leave, and Harry returned to the back of the room where Ron and Hermione were waiting. Ready? Harry muttered. Wait till everyone's gone, said Hermione nervously. All right. She approached Lockhart's desk, a piece of paper clutched in her right hand, Harry and Ron behind her. Professor Lockhart? Hermione stammered. I wanted to get this book out of the library, just for background reading. She held out the piece of paper, her hand shaking slightly. But the thing is, it's in the restricted section of the library, so I need a teacher to sign for it. I'm sure you would help me understand what you say in Gadding with Ghouls about slow action venoms. Ah, Gadding with Ghouls, said Lockhart, taking the note from Hermione and smiling widely at her. Possibly my very favorite book. You enjoyed it? Oh, yes, said Hermione eagerly. So clever the way you trapped the last one with the tea strainer. Well, I'm sure no one will mind me giving the best student in the year a little extra help, said Lockhart warmly, and he pulled out an enormous peacock quill. Yes, nice, isn't it? He said, misreading the revolted look on Ron's face. I usually save it for book signings. He scrawled an enormous, loopy signature on the note and handed it back to Hermione. So, Harry, said Lockhart, while Hermione folded the note with fumbling fingers and slipped it into her bag. Tomorrow's the first Quidditch match of the season, I believe. Gryffindor against Slytherin, is it not? I hear you're a useful player. I was seeker, too. I was asked to try for the national squad, but preferred to dedicate my life to the eradication of dark forces. Still, if ever you feel the need for a little private training, don't hesitate to ask. Always happy to pass on my expertise to the less able players. Harry made an indistinct noise in his throat and then hurried off after Ron and Hermione. I don't believe it, he said. As the three of them examined the signature on the note, he didn't even look at the book we wanted. That's because he's a brainless git, said Ron. But who cares? We got what we need. He is not a brainless git, said Hermione shrilly, and as they half ran towards the library. Just because he said you were the best student of the year. They dropped their voices as they entered the muffled stillness of the library. Madame Pince, the librarian, was a thin, irritable woman who looked like an underfed vulture. Most Ponte potions, she repeated suspiciously, trying to take the note from Hermione, but Hermione wouldn't let it go. I was wondering if I could keep it, she said breathlessly. Oh, come on, said Ron, wrenching it from her grasp and thrusting it at Madame Pince. We'll get you another autograph. Lockhart will sign anything if it stands still long enough. Madame Pince had held her note up to the light, and though determined to detect forgery, it passed the test. She stalked away between the lofty shelves and returned several minutes later carrying a large, moldy-looking book. Hermione put carefully in her bag and they left, trying not to walk too quickly or look too guilty. 5 minutes later, they were barricaded in Moaning Myrtle's out-of-order bathroom once again. Hermione had overridden Ron's objections by pointing out it was the last place anyone in their right minds would go, so they were granted some privacy. Moaning Myrtle was crying noisily in her cubicle, but they were ignoring her, and she them. Hermione opened Maste Ponte potions carefully, and the three of them bent over the damp spotted pages. It was clear from a glance why it belonged in the restriction section. Some of the potions had effects almost too gruesome to think about, and they were the most unpleasant illustrations, which included a man who seemed to have been turned inside out and a witch spouting several extra pairs of arms on her head. Here it is, said Hermione excitedly, as she found the page headed The Polyjuice Potion. It was decorated with drawings of people halfway through transforming into other people. Harry sincerely hoped the artist had imagined the looks of intense pain on their faces. This is the most complicated potion I've ever seen, said Hermione, as they scanned the recipe. Lacewing flies, leeches, fluxweed, and knotgrass, she murmured, running her fingers down the list of ingredients. Well, they're easy enough. They're easy enough. They're in the student store cupboard. We can help ourselves. Oh, look, powdered horn of a bicorn. I don't know where we're going to get that. Shredded skin of a bloomsling, that'll be tricky too. And of course, a bit of whoever we want to change into. Excuse me? Said Ron sharply. What do you mean, a bit of whoever we're changing into? I'm drinking nothing with crab's toenails in it. Hermione continued as though she hadn't heard him. We don't have to worry about that yet, though, she said, because we add those bits last. Ron turned speechless to Harry, who had another worry. Do you realize how much we're going to have to steal, Hermione? Shredded skin and boomslang? That's definitely not in the student's cupboard. What are we going to break into Snape's private stores? I don't know if that's a good idea. Hermione shut the book with a snap. Well, if you two are going to chicken out, fine, she said. There were bright pink patches on her cheeks from her eyes were brighter than usual. I don't want to break the rules, you know. I think threatening Muggleborns is far worse than brewing up a difficult potions. But if you want to find out if you don't want to find out it's Malfoy, I'll go straight to Madame Pince and hand back the book. I never thought I'd see the day when you'd be persuading us to break the rules, said Ron. All right, we'll do it. But not toenails, okay? How long will it take to make anyway, said Harry, as Hermione, looking happier, opened the book again. Well, as the fluxweed has got to be picked at the full moon and the lacewings have to be stewed for 21 days, I'd say it'll be ready in about a month, if we can get all the ingredients. A month? Said Ron. Malfoy could have attacked half Muggleborns in the school by then. But Hermione's eyes narrowed dangerously again, and he added swiftly, but it's the best plan we've got, so full steam ahead, I say. However, while Hermione was checking that the coast was clear for them to leave the bathroom, Ron muttered to Harry, It'll be a lot less hassle if you can just knock Malfoy off his broom tomorrow. Harry woke up early on Saturday morning and lay for a while thinking about the coming Quidditch match. He was nervous mainly at the thought of what Wood would say if Gryffindor lost, but also the idea of facing a team mounted on the fastest racing broomsticks gold could buy. He had never wanted to beat Slytherin so badly. After half an hour of lying there with his insides churning, he got up, dressed, and went down for breakfast early, where he found the rest of the Gryffindor team huddled at the long, empty table, all looking uptight and not speaking. As 11 o'clock approached, the whole school started to make its way down to the Quidditch stadium. It was a muggy sort of day, with a hint of thunder in the air. Ron and Hermione came hurrying over to wish Harry good luck as they entered the changing rooms. The team pulled off their scarlet Gryffindor robes and sat down to listen to Wood's usual pre-match prep talk. Slytherin have better brooms than us, he began. No point in denying it. But we've got better people on our brooms. We've trained harder than they had. We've been flying in all weathers. Too true, muttered George Weasley. I haven't been properly dry since August. And we're going to make them the rue of the day. We're going to make them rue the day they let a bit of sly Malfoy buy his way onto their team. Chests heaving with emotion, Wood returned to Harry. It'll be down to you, Harry, to show them that a seeker has to have something more than a rich father. Get that snitch before Malfoy or die trying, Harry, because we have got to win today. We have got to. So no pressure, Harry, said Fred, winking at him. As they walked out of the pitch, a roar of noise greeted them, mainly cheers, because Ravenclaw and Hufflepuff were anxious to see Slytherin beaten, but the Slytherins in the crowd made their boos and hisses heard. Madam Hooch, the Quidditch teacher, asked Flinch and Wood to shake hands, which they did, giving each other threatening stares and gripping rather harder than necessary. On my whistle, said Madam Hooch. 3, 2, 1. With a roar from the crowd and the speed upwards, the 14 players rose to the leaden sky. Harry flew higher than any of them, squinting around for the snitch. All right there, Scarhead, yelled Malfoy, shooting underneath him as to show off the speed of his broom. Harry had no time to reply. That very moment, a heavy black bludger came pelting towards him. He avoided it so narrously that he felt ruffle his hair as it passed. Close one, Harry, said George, streaking past him with his club in his hand, ready to knock the bludger backwards as a Slytherin. Harry saw George give the bludger a powerful whack in the direction of Adrian Pusey. The bludger changed direction midair and shot straight for Harry again. Harry dropped quickly to avoid it, and George managed to hit it hard towards Malfoy. Once again, the bludger swerved like a boomerang and shot at Harry. Harry put the burst of speed and zoomed towards the other side of the pitch. He could hear the bludger whistling along behind him. What was going on? Bludgers never concentrated on one player like this. It was their job to unseat as many people as possible. Fred Weasley was waiting for the bludger at the other end. Harry ducked as Fred swung the bludger with all its might. The bludger was knocked off course. That's done it, Fred yelled happily. But he was wrong. As though he magnetically attracted towards Harry, the bludger pelted after him once more, and Harry was to fly off at full speed. It had started to rain. Harry felt the drops fall into his face, splattering onto his glasses. He didn't have a clue of what was going on in the rest of the game until he heard Lee Jordan, who was commentating, say, Slytherin lead, 60 points to 0. The Slytherin superior brooms were clearly doing their jobs, and meanwhile the mad bludger was doing all it could to knock Harry out of the air. Fred and George were now flying so close to him on either side that Harry could see nothing at all, except their flailing arms, and had no chance to look for the snitch, let alone catch it. Someone's tampered with this bludger, Fred grunted, swinging his bat all around as it might as he launched into attack on Harry. We need a timeout, said George, trying to signal to Wood to stop the bludger, breaking Harry's nose at the same time. Wood had obviously got the message, and Madam Hooch's whistle rang out, and Harry, Fred, and George dived to the ground, still trying to avoid the mad bludger. What's going on? Said Wood, as the Gryffindor team huddled together, while the Slytherins in the crowd jeered. We were beaten flattened. Fred, George, where were you when the bludger stopped Angelina scoring? We were 20 feet above her, trying to stop the other bludger murdering Harry, Oliver, said George angrily. Somebody's fixed it. It won't leave Harry alone. It hasn't gone for anyone else all game. The Slytherins have done something to it. But the bludgers have been locked in Madam Hooch's office since our last practice, and there was nothing wrong with them, said Wood anxiously. Madam Hooch was walking towards them. Over her shoulder, Harry could see the Slytherin team jeering and pointing in his direction. Listen, said Harry, as she came nearer and nearer. With you two flying around me all the time, the only way I'm going to catch the snitch is if it flies up my sleeves. Go back with the rest of the team and let me deal with the rogue one. Don't be thick, said Fred. It'll take your head off. Wood was looking from Harry to the Weasleys. Oliver, this is mad, said Alicia Spinnet angrily. You can't let Harry deal with that thing on its own. Let's ask for an inquiry. If we stop now, we'll have to forfeit the match, said Harry. And we're not losing to Slytherin just because of one mad bludger. Come on, Oliver. Tell them to leave me alone. This is your fault, George said angrily to Wood. Get the snitch or die trying. What a stupid thing to tell him. Madam Hooch had joined them. Ready to resume play, she asked Wood. Wood looked at the determined look on Harry's face. So here we have the picture of Harry going around trying to find the snitch. And look who we see behind him, Malfoy. All right, he said. Fred and George, you heard Harry. Leave him alone and we'll let him deal with the bludger on his own. The rain was falling more heavily now. On Madam Hooch's whistle, Harry kicked hard into the air and heard the telltale whoosh of the bludger behind him. Higher and higher, Harry climbed, and he looped and he swooped and spiraled and zigzagged and rolled. Slightly dizzy, he nevertheless kept his eyes wide open. Rain was speckling his glasses and ran up his nostrils as he hung upside down, avoiding another fierce dive from the bludger. He could hear laughter from the crowd. He knew he must look very stupid, but the rogue bludger was heavy and couldn't change direction as quickly as he could. He began a kind of roller coaster ride around the edges of the stadium and squinting through the silver sheets of rain to the Gryffindor goalposts where Adrian Pusey was trying to get past Wood. A whistling in Harry's ear told him the bludger had just missed him again. He turned right over and sped in the opposite direction. "Training for the ballet, Potter," yelled Malfoy, as Harry was forced to do a stupid kind of twirl in midair to dodge a bludger. Off Harry fled, the bludger trailing a few feet behind him, then glaring back at Malfoy in hatred. He saw it. The golden snitch. It was hovering inches above Malfoy's left ear, but Malfoy, busy laughing at Harry, hadn't seen it. For an agonizing moment, Harry hung in midair, daring not to speed towards Malfoy in case he saw the snitch. Wham! He stayed still a second too long. The bludger hit him, at last smashed into his elbow, and Harry felt his arm break. Dimly dazed by the searing pain in his arm, he slid sideways in the rain-drenched broom, one knee still crooked over his right arm, dangling useless at his side. The bludger came pelting back for a second attack, but this time aiming at his face. Harry swerved out of the way, one idea firmly lodged in his numb brain: get to Malfoy. Through a haze of rain, in pain, he dived for the shimmering and sneering face below him and saw its eyes widen with fear. Malfoy thought Harry was attacking him. "What the?" he gasped, carrying out of Harry's way. Harry took the remaining hand off of his broom and made a wild snatch. He felt his fingers close on the cold snitch, but it was only now gripping the broom with his legs, and there was a yell from the crowd below as he headed straight for the ground, trying hard not to pass out. With a splattering thud, he hit the mud and rolled off his broom. His arm was hanging at the very strange angle. Riddled with pain, he heard, as from a distance, a good deal of whistling and shouting. He focused on the snitch in his good hand. "Aha," he said vaguely. "We've won." And then he fainted. He came around, rain falling on his face, still lying on the pitch with someone leaning over him. He saw a glitter of teeth. "Oh no, not you," he moaned. "Doesn't know what he's saying," says Lockhart loudly to the anxious crowd of Gryffindors pressing them. "Not to worry, Harry. I'm about to fix your arm." "No," said Harry. "I'll keep it like this, thanks." He tried to sit up, but the pain was terrible. He heard a familiar clicking noise nearby. "I don't want a photo of this, Colin," he said loudly. "Lie back, Harry," said Lockhart soothingly. "It's a simple charm I've used countless of times." "Why can't I just go to the hospital, Wings?" said Harry through clenched teeth. "You really should, Professor," said a muddy Wood, who couldn't help grinning even though his secret was injured. "Great capture, Harry. Really spectacular. Your best yet, I'd say." Though the thicket of leg around him, Harry spotted Fred and George Weasley wrestling the rogue bludger into a box. It was still putting up a terrific fight. "Stand back," said Lockhart, who was rolling up his green sleeves. "No, don't," said Harry weakly. But Lockhart was twirling his hand for a second later and directed it straight at Harry's arms. A strange and unpleasant sensation started at Harry's shoulder and spread all the way down to his fingertips. It felt as though his arm was being deflated. He didn't dare look at what was happening. He shut his eyes. His face turned away from his arm, but his worst fears realized above him when he gasped and Colin Creevey began clicking away madly. His arm didn't hurt anymore, nor did it feel like an arm. "Ah," said Lockhart. "Well, sometimes that can happen. But the point is, the bones are no longer broken. That's the thing to bear in mind. So, Harry, just toddle up to the hospital wing. Mr. Weasley, Miss Granger, would you escort him? And Madame Pomfrey will be able to tend you up a bit." As Harry got to his feet, he felt strangely lopsided. Taking a deep breath, he looked down at his right side. What he saw nearly made him pass out. Poking at the ends of his robe was what looked like a thick, flesh-covered glove. Trying to move his fingers, nothing happened. Lockhart hadn't mended Harry's bones. He had removed them. Madame Pomfrey wasn't pleased at all. "You should have come straight to me," she raged, holding up the limp remainder. Half an hour before, it had a working arm. I can't mend bones in a second, but I can mend bones in a second, but growing them back. "You will be able to, won't you?" said Harry desperately. "I'll be able to, certainly, but it will be painful," said Madame Pomfrey grimly, throwing Harry a pair of pajamas. "You'll have to stay the night." Hermione waited outside the curtain drawn around Harry's bed while Ron helped him into his pajamas. It took a while to stuff the rubbery, boneless arm into the sleeve. "How can you stick up for Lockhart now, Hermione, eh?" Ron called through the curtain ear. curtain as he pulled Harry's limp fingers through the cuff. If Harry wanted deboning, he would have asked. Anyone could make a mistake, said Hermione, and it doesn't hurt anymore. Does it, Harry? No, said Harry, but it doesn't have anything else either. He heard himself as he swung himself onto the bed, his arm flapped pointlessly. Hermione and Madame Pomfrey came around the curtain. Madame Pomfrey was holding a large bottle of something called Skelegro. You're in for a rough night, she said, pouring out a steaming beaker full and handing it to him. Regrowing bones is a nasty business. So was taking Skelegro. It burned Harry's mouth and throat as it went down, making him cough and splutter. Still tut-tutting about the dangerous sports of inept teachers, Madame Pomfrey retreated, leaving Ron and Hermione to help Harry gulp down some water. We won, though, said Ron, a grin breaking across his face. That was some catch he made. Malfoy's face. He looked ready to kill. I want to know how he had fixed the bludger, said Hermione darkly. We can add that to the list of questions when we've taken the polyjuice potion, said Harry, sinking back into his pillows. I hope it tastes better than this stuff. If it's got bits of Slytherin in it, you've got to be joking, said Ron. The door to the hospital wing burst open, and at that moment, filthy and soaking wet rest of the Gryffindor team arrived to see Harry. Unbelievable flying, Harry, said George. I'd seen Marcus Flint yelling at Malfoy. Something about having the snitch on top of his head and not noticing. Malfoy didn't seem too happy. They had brought cake, sweets, and bottles of pumpkin juice as they gathered around Harry's bed, and were just getting started on what promised to be a good party when Madame Pomfrey came storming over, shouting, "This boy needs to rest. He's got 33 bones to grow. Out! Out!" Here is the Skelegro label. And Harry was left alone with nothing to distract him from the stabbing pains in his limp arm. Hours and hours later, Harry awoke with quite suddenly in a pitch blackness and gave a small yelp of pain. His arm now fell full of large splinters. For a second, he thought that's what has woken him. Then, with a thrill of horror, he realized that something was sponging his forehead in the dark. "Get off," he said loudly. And then, "Dobby?" The house elf's goggling tennis ball eyes were peering at Harry through the darkness. A single tear was running down his long, pointed nose. "Harry Potter came back to school," he whispered miserably. "Dobby warned and warned Harry Potter. Ah, sir, why didn't you heed Dobby? Why didn't Harry Potter go home when he missed the train?" Harry heaved himself up on his pillows and pushed Dobby's sponge away. "What are you doing here?" he said. "How do you know I missed the train?" Dobby's lip trembled as Harry seized by a sudden suspicion. "It was you," he said slowly. "You stopped the barrier from letting us through." "Indeed, yes, sir," said Dobby, nodding his head vigorously, his ears flapping. "Dobby hid and watched Harry Potter and sealed the gateway, and Dobby had to iron his hands after." He showed Harry 10 long, bandaged fingers. "But Dobby didn't care, sir, for he thought Harry Potter was safe. Never did Dobby dream Harry Potter would get to school another way." He was rocking backwards and forwards, shaking his ugly head. "Dobby was so shocked when he heard Harry Potter was back at Hogwarts. He left his master's dinner burn. Such a flogging Dobby never had, sir." Harry slumped back into his pillows. "You nearly got Ron and me expelled," he said fiercely. "You better clear off before my bones come back, Dobby, or I might strangle you." Dobby smiled weakly. "Dobby is used to death threats, sir. Dobby gets them 5 times a day at home." He blew his nose at the corner of his filthy pillowcase he wore, looking so pathetic. Harry felt anger ebb away in spite of himself. Why do you wear that thing, Dobby?" he asked curiously. "This, sir?" said Dobby, plucking the pillowcase. "'Tis a mark of a house elf's enslavement, sir. Dobby can only be freed if his masters present him with clothes, sir. This family is careful not to pass Dobby even a sock, sir, for then he would be free to leave their house forever." Dobby mopped bloodshot eyes and said suddenly, "Harry Potter must go home." Dobby thought the bludger would be enough to make— "Your bludger?" said Harry, anger rising once more. "What do you mean, your bludger? You made that bludger to try and kill me?" "Not kill you, sir, never kill you," said Dobby, shocked. "Dobby wanted to save Harry Potter's life. Better sent home grievously injured than remain here, sir. Dobby only wanted Harry Potter hurt enough to be sent home." "Oh, is that all?" said Harry angrily. "I don't suppose you're going to tell me why you want to send me home." "Oh, if Harry Potter only knew!" Dobby groaned, more tears dribbling onto his ragged pillowcase. "If he knew what he means to us lowly, enslaved, us dregs of the magical word. Dobby remembers how it was when he who must not be named was the height of his power, sir. We house elves were treated like vermin. Of course, Dobby is still treated like that, sir, he admitted, drying his face on the pillowcase. But mostly, sir, life has improved for my kind since you triumphant over he who must not be named. Harry Potter survived the Dark Lord's power. It was broken, and it was a new dawn, sir. Harry Potter shone like a beacon of hope for those of us who had dark days would never end. Now Hogwarts, terrible things are about to happen, or perhaps happening already, and Dobby cannot let Harry Potter stay here and let history repeat itself. Now that the Chamber of Secrets is open once more. Dobby froze, horror-struck, then grabbed Harry's water jug from his bedside table and cracked it over his head, toppling out of sight. A second later, he crawled back onto his bed, cross-eyed, muttering, "Bad Dobby, very bad Dobby." "So there is a Chamber of Secrets?" Harry whispered. "And did you say it's been open before? Tell me, Dobby." He seized the elf's bony wrist as Dobby had inched towards the water jug. "But I'm not Muggle-born. How can I be in danger from the chamber?" "Ah, sir, ask no more of poor Dobby," stammered the elf, his eyes huge in the dark. "Dark deeds are planned for this place. But Harry Potter must not be here when they happen. Go home, Harry Potter. Go home, Harry Potter. Must not meddle at this, sir. 'Tis too dangerous." "Who is it, Dobby?" Harry said, keeping a firm hold on Dobby's wrist, trying to stop him from hitting himself with the water jug again. "Who opened it? Who opened it last time?" "Dobby can't, sir. Dobby can't. Dobby mustn't tell," he squealed the elf. "Go home, Harry Potter, go home." "I'm not going anywhere," Harry said fiercely. "One of my best friends is Muggle-born. She'll be first in the line if the chamber has really been opened." "Harry Potter risks his own life for his friends," moaned Dobby in a kind, miserable ecstasy. "So noble, so valiant. But he must save himself. He must. Harry Potter must not." Dobby suddenly froze, his bad ears quivering. Harry heard it too. There was footsteps coming from the passage outside. "Dobby must go," breathed the elf, terrified. There was a loud crack, and Harry's fist was suddenly clenched in the air. He slumped back onto bed, his dark eyes on the doorway of the hospital rooming, as footsteps drew nearer. Next moment, Dumbledore was backing into the dormitory, wearing a long woolly dressing gown and a nightcap. He was carrying what looked like a statue. Professor McGonagall appeared a second later, carrying its feet. Together, they heaved it into bed. "Get Madame Pomfrey," whispered Dumbledore. And Professor McGonagall hurried past Harry's bed until out of sight. Harry lay quite still, pretending to be asleep. He heard urgent voices, and then Professor McGonagall swept back into view, closely followed by Madame Pomfrey, who was pulling a cardigan over her nightdress. He heard a sharp intake of breath. "What happened?" Madame Pomfrey whispered to Dumbledore, bending over the statue on the bed. "Another attack," said Dumbledore. "Minerva found him on the stairs." "There was a bunch of grapes next to him," said Professor McGonagall. "We think he was trying to sneak up here to visit Potter." Harry's stomach gave such a horrible lurch. Slowly and carefully, he raised himself a few inches and looked at the statue. A ray of moonlight across its staring face. It was Colin Creevey. His eyes were wide, and his hands were stuck in front of him, holding up his camera. "Petrified?" whispered Madame Pomfrey. "Yes," said Professor McGonagall. "But I shudder to think, if Albus hadn't been on his way downstairs for hot chocolate, who knows what might have." The three of them stared down at Colin. Then Dumbledore leaned forward and prized the camera out of Colin's grip. "You don't think he managed to get a picture of the attacker?" said Professor McGonagall eagerly. Dumbledore didn't answer. He prized open the back of the camera. "Good gracious," said Madame Pomfrey. Jet steam hissed out of the camera. Harry, 3 beds away, caught the acrid smell of burnt plastic. "Melted," said Madame Pomfrey. Wonderingly, "All melted. What does this mean, Albus?" Professor McGonagall asked urgently. "It means," said Dumbledore, "that the Chamber of Secrets is indeed open again." Madame Pomfrey slapped her hand over her mouth, and Professor McGonagall stared at Dumbledore. "But Albus, surely who?" "The question is not who," said Dumbledore, his eyes on Colin. "The question is how." And from what Harry could see of Professor McGonagall's shadowy face, she didn't understand this any better than he did. All right, that is where we are going to stop today. boys and girls, I want you guys to think about, what is the Chamber of Secrets? Who opened it? And why are all these students being petrified? And why does Dobby want Harry Potter to leave Hogwarts so badly? All right, everyone, that's it for me today. I hope you have a great day, and I'll talk to you all soon. Bye-bye.